start, I've got like a little theory about sort of dating, and I wanted to get sort of your thoughts
Mm,
on it. So it's by a guy called Rory Sutherland, and he says dating is kind of like the housing market in that you don't want a house when you're starting. You don't want a house that everyone wants because it's going to be extremely expensive and high maintenance. But you want to pick a house that you has characteristics that you don't mind but other people don't like. So for example, if there's a house with a railway line, he a lot of people won't like that. But if you don't mind that, then that's a good place to start. And I think this is quite similar
mm.
with this complex dating world that a lot of people are struggling to find maybe first partners and early partners in. Um, yeah, what do you sort of think about this?
I'm not sure if I quite get the analogy. So we're building a house and it's kind of to our liking where, you know, if there's something that's not perfect but we like it, then
So,
it's like,
in the market, there's characteristics which a lot of people won't find desirable, but you actually don't mind. Whereas, yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah. So do you think like it's a good way to navigate like a first relationship in sort of going with what like the dating some of the a lot of the dating market won't want?
Mm. Um, yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, um, I think it comes back to like ourself, like um, what we are looking for in a partner, whether like it's a collective, um, you know, desirable aspect or not. If we know what we're looking for and that's what we're building or that's what we're, buying into, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as yeah, we know what it is that we're accepting, we know what it is that we desire and what we want, and other people, it might not be their thing. Like, I actually just bought a house recently, so I didn't think that I would want a one floor house like a rancher. I always thought like I would want, two level, three level, maybe not three level, that's too big, but two level. But once my partner and I went to go see it, there were so many different aspects to the place that was desirable, and it actually felt good when we were there. And so it aligned with a lot of the things that we wanted. It wasn't perfect. Like you know, there's one bathroom and a half and three bedrooms. So if this is going to be like our home for the next 5+ years, and we want to have children in the next few years, then I don't know if that half bathroom works for us. We probably need two full bathrooms. But when we look at the house as a whole and just how it's structured and how it felt for us, and we took the bad and the good, and we made a decision that, yeah, we can make this work. This is something that we can build towards. This is something that maybe we renovate in a couple of years. Not right now. We don't need to right now, but maybe in a few years we would renovate. Um, and so there's an agreement there between the both of us that we're okay with, the um, with yeah, like the half bathroom for now. I hope that kind of connects to um, yeah, what you're thinking about in regards to dating.
Yeah, I think this is along a similar line of like I wanted to branch off into this idea of like people's expectations around like relationships and partners and people they're willing to date, and kind of links to that housing market analogy as well. And do you think like because of the way the sort of dating world is these days compared to maybe 50 years ago, where technology allows us to see so many options of people around in our area or even all around the world, that we have like inflated expectations, say, of what we're looking for, and it takes away the authenticity of maybe how people would have met 50 years ago, where you connect with that person in real life and you see their imperfections and they're actually the parts of them that you like. And now these days it's more sort of
Mhm.
superficial. And to use the same analogy, it's sort of like everyone is entering the housing market looking for like a mansion, when really they should start with something that they can then refurbish and work on themselves as time goes on and as they develop as a person. So do you think that
Mhm.
my question is, do you think that there's a problem of expectations in people going into dating these days compared to maybe how it was in the past, and how do we navigate that if it is a problem?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. Like, um, yeah, I think social media has become a really like dangerous element when it comes to dating because it's created this false reality that people have all these options when in reality they don't. Like there's the element of um, comparison and people kind of being influenced by what they see and thinking that maybe I want that, or maybe I should have that, or maybe I deserve that, or and everything that we're seeing, whatever we think we want and we deserve, and blah blah blah. It's all just the exterior. We're not seeing like behind the closed doors. We don't actually know what that person character is like. We don't know what that relationship that we're admiring so much online between two influencers or whatever, where they're making money off like the videos that they're posting and whatever it is. They might not even actually love each other. It could be a relationship of convenience, but we're seeing so much like, um, yeah, just a lot of fakeness, and we don't know that. We believe like that's what I should have, and that's how my relationship should be. And if it's not, if it doesn't look like that, then it's not good enough. And we also have this huge influx of like mental health talk online that isn't actually beneficial. A lot of conversations about, if he behaves like this or if she behaves like this, they're a narcissist. And it's so unhealthy. So yeah, this conversation could go in so many ways because I think social media is extremely damaging and a huge threat to real relationships, like authentic connection. Um,
So,
so yeah, I
sorry,
agree.
I just wanted to then go more, dig a little bit deeper into that. So, how do you suggest and how would you advise to like cut out all of that noise, not be swayed by the fakeness and the artificial like mirage that they see online of how relationships should be and what
Mhm.
partners they should go for? How do we find that authentic connection, um, with the fact that that's the world we live in now? Like, what would be your advice to someone in a position like that that resonated with what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, spend less time online, go out, be in nature, meet people, you know, in real life, like go to cafes, go out, socialize with friends. There are so many ways to meet people in person. And when you meet someone in person, you're actually able to not just, um, see whether there's real attraction there, but you're also getting an energetic vibe. Like, does it feel good to be around this person? Right? Like you can sense when someone is fake. You can sense when someone has, something just off about them. But online you can't because online it's all filtered and it's all manipulated in a way where we're only showing our best selves. Um, and And so in person, energy can't be faked. So I think it's really important to, I personally don't like being online. Um, I limit myself to 1 hour a day, and um, and that's between, answering DMs, posting on stories, and posting reels or content, whatever it is. If I run out of time, like if I hit that 1 hour, I'm off. It's just something that I've kind of trained myself to do because there were too many days in the past where, and sometimes I still will find myself like swiping away that alert. But there's just been too many days where I'm just swiping mindlessly. I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my energy. I'm, you know, opening up myself to um, receiving content that isn't necessarily beneficial. Like my subconscious mind is something that I try to protect just as much as my conscious mind. And so, yeah, I think spending less time online is really important and being mindful when you are like viewing something. You know, is this real? And what am I taking from this? Like, how is this actually serving me? Um, yeah, there are a lot of people that are just wasting time online. Like there's no real genuine connections happening. I think it doesn't mean that we can't. We can. Like there's been several people who've tried to connect with me online, opposite gender, interested in me. They don't know I'm dating because I don't post my partner online and I don't share a lot of my relationship online. So I get DMs from some men, trying to get to know me. And I think it's not a bad way to go, um, but it could be kind of a tricky way to navigate because what might speak to some other person isn't going to speak to me, and vice versa. So, a heart emoji and a fire emoji and, telling me that I'm beautiful doesn't go anywhere. Um, and and so I think when we are trying to make a genuine connection online, we need to take that extra step of like actually getting to know someone, like, um, opening up their mind, asking them a meaningful question. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I also think as well, like a lot of girls must just get so many guys just like giving them attention, flooding attention with DMs. It's like it's hard to compete. Like, I think, uh, if you don't mind, Joe, I think you should share your lifeguard interaction now because I want to see what Mariam would suggest to do in that situation.
Right, here we go. Well, actually, it actually links to a question that I wrote down my notes here from what you just said there. Because I agree with your advice of like, you have to put out that energy and that vibe in the real world and see what comes to you because that's more authentic and a more valuable way to go about things. And my question was going to be, what would be your advice then for people that would reply to that and go, yeah, but I'm so anxious about interacting with a stranger in the real world, or I don't feel confident enough to introduce myself, and I'm worried about feeling like I'm being creepy, or like what I mean. That to me is the stereotypical response I'd imagine, and also then to get vulnerable, I'll tell a story. So yesterday I was at the sauna after a gym session, right? One of my favorite things to do, and I was outside the sauna, like cooling down and letting my heart rate settle. And like there was this lifeguard that was looking over the pool, and I found her quite attractive, right? And at various points, like she'd made eye contact with me and like smiled or whatever. I was like, okay, I'm in two scenarios here. It's like, well, do I just go on with the rest of my day and like forget this girl existed, or do I go and talk to her, or do I like go and get changed because I'm in like swimming trunks right now, and then try and find her and talk to her? And like, how do I navigate that situation in this modern world? Because I feel often, right, as a young man, and I wonder what you think about this, is I feel like there's this perception that if we try and like talk to a girl we don't know, there's this like preconception that we are weird, right? Because of like things like the Me Too movement that protect that
Mm,
gave a voice to all of the sort of the manipulation and exploitation that 100% goes on. But what worries me as a young man, right, is that those movements and the way that now I think a lot of young girls perceive sort of guys in the real world, yes, it protects them from like the horrible men that do horrible things, but it also protects them against all men, like good guys like me. Like I think I'm not a horrible bloke. So what would be your advice in situations like that? And then for people that want to generate like that good vibrant energy in the world, and how do we square this circle of this problem that people are scared that they're coming across creepy and they don't know how to interact in that authentic way? I know that's a lot of questions, but see where you want to take that, and we'll go deeper.
Yeah, I mean, the way that she responds has nothing to do with you. It's how healed she is. How much work has she done on herself, right? Like, if a guy was to approach me, I'm not gonna attack him and be like, I'm like, assume that he's coming at me with the worst intention. But maybe when I was 20 years old, maybe that would be the case. Maybe a guy would approach me and I'll be like, what do you want? I'll show on my face that I'm just kind of like back off, like I'm not interested, or I might say something mean. But as a woman now in my, who's 35 years old, I like I've done a lot of work on myself where when a man approaches me, and I have awareness about the Me Too movement, and I have awareness about how the fourth wave of feminism movement has also impacted a lot of the way that we interact today. And so I'm gonna be compassionate. I'm gonna be open. I don't know, I don't know where this interaction is gonna go, but I'm not going to assume the worst. So it actually, like, it's such an ick for me when I see women react to men who are just like approaching them calmly, respectfully, and they're treating them as if it was that time, maybe like 5 years ago, where they walked across the street and there was a construction site and these guys were whistling and these guys were, saying inappropriate things. So they're taking their rage and their like, insecurity and their anger, their hurt from that, feeling embarrassed, feeling threatened, feeling humiliated, whatever it is. And now they're placing it on every man. It doesn't make sense. And so I think when a woman is healed enough, it does, like, she doesn't have to be perfectly healed. We're constantly growing and healing and, processing our life and our lived experiences. But yeah, that kind of response, I would say that that's on her. Like, I would not, if I was a man, I would not want to be around that woman. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to approach and say hello. But as soon as I get that kind of response, I'm just going to walk away from it. Um, and probably my attraction is going to go way down because that's not the kind of person um, that is attractive to me, right? So, um, yeah, and I mean, I understand how scary it is for men to approach women nowadays. Like, I get this, I get stories all the time. Um, and I think the only way is through. The only way is like to keep on approaching, right? Doing it in the best way possible. And then you're going to approach the right women and it's going to feel different and it's going to be quite healing to all the past experiences of those women who've reacted in that way.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice sort of way of framing it that I haven't really heard before. And that, yeah, I mean, if you're a genuine person coming from a caring, like authentic place, then you get a negative reaction. Then it's that person's problem because they're the one that's not open to your good energy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you talk
Mm-hmm.
about Drew. I mean, I just think about like analogies from my life. The more you do something, if it's scary or uncomfortable initially, the easier it will be over time because you realize you don't die. You know what I mean? Life just carries on. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. And
On
what about? Oh, if you got a question, Jake, you
I was just going to ask about the male sides. If there's kind of for me, when if I was approaching someone, the kind of thing that I've built up is you don't kind of go for an outcome. You want to build up a vibe, but then that's kind of the hard part. So I wanted to ask like if there's sort of a style or like a way, a sort of best way that a male should approach someone.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't like to necessarily say this is how you should do it and this is what you shouldn't do. I think at the end of the day, like, um, look at past experiences, what's worked for you personally, right? And what hasn't worked. And I think like humor goes a long way. I think like keeping it very casual goes a long way. Like what you said about, no expectation of outcome, that goes a long way. That relieves a lot of the stress. When my partner and I first met, um, like I had no expectation that he was like, I wasn't looking to date. It was my first time on, what was it, Bumble, a dating app ever. And I was only on it because all my colleagues from school were on it, and I was studying to become a relationship counselor. And so I'm like, let me see what's out there, what's happening on these apps. So it was kind of like, I'm just doing some research. Um, and so when I saw him, I'm like, he has nothing on his profile page that tells me about him. He's just like a really pretty face. And so um, for me, I'm just like, I decided to swipe, and without any thought of us like becoming an item or being here today, I just kind of thought it would be nice to just have a conversation and see how it goes. And so when we approach things from that place where we're not desperate for the other person to respond in any certain way, because regardless whether that interaction went well or not, it doesn't actually say anything about me. It doesn't reflect on who I am. And so, the worst case scenario is that we don't hit it off. The worst case scenario is that we're not aligned. The worst case scenario is that he doesn't swipe back, or whatever, right? Like, that's not so bad. And so, yeah, I really like that, not having, determined an outcome for an interaction. Um, and just being authentic in how we approach things. If we're funny, and if we think of something like funny, or if we just kind of think of something spontaneous in a moment, just go for it. Because I think one of the most attractive things that's so underrated, is like those weird quirkiness to people, that comes out in those spontaneous moments, um, that aren't planned, right? When someone comes up to you and they're not rehearsed, they're not like, this is what I'm gonna say, and then if she says this, this is how I'll respond. Like, you kind of like feel for that, right? And you also know when someone is kind of using the same line that they use over and over again. And so I actually had a good interaction. I think it was 4 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. Anyways, I love going to the beach and just reading my book and just spending time alone. Um, and this guy just randomly approached me and said, hey, I was walking by and there's like a trail by, where I was. And he's just like, I was walking by, and I just wanted to come and say hi, because I think you're beautiful and just want to know, like, are you are you single? And I told him I'm not, but like, thank you for, coming this way and like saying that. And I know how it could be very daunting to approach a woman nowadays. And so like, he kept a respectful distance. He wasn't like right up in my space. He wasn't staring at my butt or my body or whatever. He just simply like came, kept comfortable space, and just shot his shot. And if I was single and if I found him attractive, like I think that was fine enough. I would invite him to, or maybe, I don't know if I would invite him, but if he was to ask me, like, can he sit with me? If he was to ask me, like, oh, what book are you reading? What's it about? Like, that would be a great interaction, in my opinion. It's very like, it's just not planned out. It's right there in the moment. It's present. It's authentic. And whether we hit it off or not, who knows? Um, so yeah, I think there are a lot of amazing women out there who are not going to respond in terrifying ways. Um, and those who do, they're just not right for you.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, some really sound advice. I'm interested to pivot slightly into like your story of how you got into this and like where your interest in like the world of relationships and then relationship counseling, and was it a psychology background? Because I'm interested in that because I'm a psychology student. And yeah, tell me a little bit about like why you decided to go down this route and maybe some lessons you've learned along the way from working with clients or things that you learned while training, and we'll pivot off from there.
Yeah, man, what brought me into psychology was like pain. My parents separated when I was quite young. I was 5 years old. My dad went abroad to work, and after they separated, we just sort of got like sent off to him without really any word. Like my brother and I didn't really know what was happening. We knew my dad was, abroad working. And at the time, we were in Lebanon. My mom is Lebanese. She was living there with her mom. And yeah, and then one day we are just kind of told, like, oh, you're going to go and live with your dad. And then we got sent off to Dubai or Kuwait, some other country. And yeah, and I think just the whole experience was very bizarre. It was very confusing. There is some understanding that my parents were no longer together, but it wasn't talked about. And so it caused me a lot of pain because I couldn't understand. Um, I grew up with, I don't know necessarily where this came from, but this belief that relationships were forever. Um, and that, like when you're married, like you're married for life. So like divorce, separation, like it was just not a thing that I saw or heard about. Um, and then, yeah, so I just had a lot of pain from that, growing up with my dad and my brother, away from my mom, traveling quite a bit, from school to school, from city to city, country to country. There is no stability. So actually, I was quite an angry kid. And and then in grade 12, we had an elective, and I chose psychology, and I learned about childhood psychology, childhood development, and attachment, and conditioning, and all these different concepts that I thought were so interesting and intriguing. And I thought it would help me understand myself, and it would help me understand my parents, because up to that point, like I didn't feel that I had a close connection with them or that I understood them at all. And yeah, and then the rest was history. I just got so into it. I just kept learning. And then I actually took a break from school and I started working with children. I always had a heart for kids, and um, because I learned about how the first 5 years of a human life is just so freaking significant. So I thought, okay, let me go and like work with young kids and make an impact there. And then I realized that, I'm only seeing these kids a few hours a day, whereas they're going home. Their parents probably don't know all the things that I know. Um, and so I figured maybe it was time to work with the parents. Maybe it was time to work with adults and kind of like educate them and help them heal their past wounds and traumas and whatnot so that, they can raise healthy, confident children, and maybe the world would be a better place. So it's like to impact the next generation, I need to impact the adults. And that's kind of how, yeah, how I came here into the field of psychology and counseling. And and I took a strong interest in existential psychology or existential therapy. So I've been doing that for about 5.5 years now. And that's what I'm doing my master's in as well. It's just a different model of therapy. There are so many different models out there. Um, yeah, does that is that a good place to start?
Yeah, yeah. It's and I guess I resonate with. I thought it was actually firstly quite powerful when you started with your interest began through pain, because like I guess my interest in similar things came from the fact that I was at this like crossroads point with my education when all the lockdowns happened and stuff, and I realised that
Mm,
I didn't want to hang out with the friend group that I was hanging out with because it all just went quite stale at that point, and I don't know, some level of self awareness hit me. I realised they weren't the kind of people I wanted to be around anymore, and then I went into a quite a long period of just like social isolation, and then during
mm,
and where things were pretty difficult, I then discovered certain ideas about the world and myself that I found so fascinating, and I still find fascinating 4 years later, and I think I'll still find fascinating for the next 40 years. Um, and I think it's interesting that there's yeah similarities in how people find their like interest in I don't know like trying to discover about themselves and the world and other people's relationships around them. Talk about your parents and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I can resonate with that a lot. So thanks for sharing that. Um, I'm interested then in like well a lot of things you just said, but I'll start with when people come to you for like relationship counseling or this. Do you do the like existential counseling for relationships, or is that just general like counseling, or is there a relationship focus?
yeah, so well, just to kind of go back to what you're saying, I think pain is the biggest motivator. It's actually like, yeah, pain and anger. Um, Sometimes they get a bad rep. Sometimes we kind of have negative connotation to them, but they are, yeah, they move us towards something meaningful. They move us towards our values, um, and ultimately finding ourselves. So yeah, I think it's really wonderful when people can embrace pain and anger and sadness even. But yeah, with my work, I actually blend um, counseling and coaching together. And so, because within the counseling field, there are just so many different needs, and you don't really know what someone is coming in with. And in order to like whenever we have a new client, we need to get their information, and part of the information that we need is like where they live, because in case we're on a call with them, and let's say I'm unaware that this person has past suicidal tendencies or something like that, and something triggering happens on a call, or maybe something bad happens that day and they're very activated, and so, in order to really ensure their safety, I would need to know the protocols. And so I can't actually, or it's recommended that I don't do therapy or counsel outside of my country. And because of that, it's kind of limited me in some ways with starting my own practice of counseling because yeah, there's so many wonderful counselors here in my country and in my city, and I wanted to kind of go beyond just counseling because I do have some passion for education, um, and I think education is a really important piece in the work that I do. And so I started learning about coaching, and I kind of um, started doing mainly coaching, but I still incorporate counseling practices and my knowledge from that to build the therapeutic relationship and whatnot. But now I'm able to focus on relationships, and now I'm able to kind of not take on clients who might be higher risk, so I'm able to kind of branch out. And I love that idea because I get to meet people from all around the world and kind of learn about, how relationships are done or the different quirks and nuances and dating in different countries and places. So yeah, I keep my counseling practice within BC, within my province or within my country, and my coaching is global.
Okay, yeah.
And with yeah, with existential therapy, like there's so many amazing things that I've learned. It's more like it's more of a way of life, and I just kind of naturally bring that into some aspect of it into my coaching practice. Um, but yeah, it really depends on the client and what their needs are.
Okay, thanks for.
Yeah, so within the therapy realm, you have Jungian, you have CBT, you have Gestalt, you have so many different modalities. And existential therapy is just another modality. And the structure of it is really focused more on the subjective living experience of a person. And it tends to be quite of a, like with most therapy models, it's like a long duration of mostly talk therapy. And sometimes people are not looking to do therapy, and therapy can be quite in-depth work. Some people might be just kind of needing support with communication in their relationship, or might be needing support with drawing boundaries or conflict management, things like that. So they're not looking to necessarily get into in-depth work. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Like the question that I've been trying to direct this to is I'm interested if there are any like common themes or maybe like common struggles that you find people come to you regularly in maybe your coaching practice or in counseling environments. So, is there anything that come up a lot that people face, and then if so, what are they? If not, is it all people kind of have their own unique cases? Or if there are some regular themes, how do you help people navigate them? If you could pick like one or two examples, that'd be interesting to go into.
Yeah. Hmm. So within, let's say, coaching, because I work with the subconscious mind. I use a few different modalities to work with the subconscious, and so it's a lot of the stories that people tell themselves, a lot of limiting beliefs that people have. Um, so even if someone wants to achieve something, let's say, like we know habits, for example, like it takes quite some time to train ourselves to actually adapt a new habit. And so, like, people can want something in life, and yet and strive so hard towards it and yet not achieve it, and just kind of come across so many bumps and blocks. And so it's important to look at, what is the limiting beliefs behind that? What are the stories behind that to why someone, keeps on, um, and so also, I guess, like a blend of attachment, right? Like why someone might continue to pursue a certain type of relationship when they clearly want something else. Um, so a lot of people struggle with finding themselves either in situationships or maybe attracting, um, quote unquote, a narcissist. And there's kind of that blame aspect of like, oh, that person did this to me. How come every man that I meet, how come every woman that I meet does this, or, ends up like this? And I think the common denominator at the end of the day is us. And so really kind of looking at our patterns and what our patterns are trying to tell us. And so, yeah, I think many people come to me because they're unsatisfied in the relationship, to some extent. And most of the time, what I've kind of seen more and more is like not choosing someone that aligns with their values, um, and wondering why the relationship is not moving forward. Or having their own like um, healing blocks, from, moving forward in the relationship. It's never just the other person. We always have to look at ourselves. Yeah, and that's hard.
Apologies, his connection's usually not this bad.
No worries. So he said he's going to restart it,
Yeah, yeah, he'll
or
be back, and then apparently he's got a question.
mm,
how long was the training process to get to where you are now? So do you do like a few years psychology degree and then like train specifically in existential now in the masters you're doing, and like how long did that take?
hmm.
I'm just interested personally.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, typically, you would need a bachelor degree um, in psychology, and then you can do a specialized program. There are so many different specialized programs, in Toronto, which is not where I am. I'm in Vancouver, but Toronto, another province or city, they're pretty big with Jungian, Carl Jung. So his approach to therapy. So that has a lot to do with the subconscious mind as well, and like dreams and things like that. And so, yeah, it really depends on what kind of what speaks to you regarding a modality, and existential therapy is actually very popular in Austria. Um, but yeah, it came to Canada not that long ago, actually. We don't have that many cohorts. And so it's just like additional, you could do a diploma, or you can do the um, full on psychotherapy practice, and you can do your master's. It really depends on what you want to study, or how far you want to go, and what the regulations are within your country. But for us, that's kind of typically people will do their bachelor degree, and then they will either go and specialize in something that might be 4 to 6 years, or they might just do like a diploma program for like 2 years or so. And yeah, and they can work. Actually, my province, which is something that I don't really like, um, is that we're not fully regulated. So we're kind of last now to start and get regulated. So a lot of people who don't even have psychology degree or background can claim to be a counselor,
Oh, right.
which is kind of dangerous. Yeah, so it's based on like I have life experience, so I'm gonna teach people based on that. Or maybe I read some books, or maybe I studied, you know, I did a little bit of studying online or whatever, and now I'm a counselor. So yeah, there are different designations to kind of separate individuals from how much um, background they have, but I'm not a believer that someone has to go through rigorous education to be in the space of teaching or helping people. Because I know a friend of mine actually a while back hired a counselor who had her master's degree and all the fancy stuff. And then on that first call, this counselor told my friend that she should leave her boyfriend. And that's not something that, like, um, yeah, and other things actually. She made a comment about his ethnic background, and yeah, and so it really threw off my friend, and she shared that with me, and I'm like, you need you need a different therapist, you need a different counselor.
Yeah.
That's very unprofessional. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, Jacob, go with your
Yeah,
question.
I was just saying, like, the biggest thing that I've kind of got from this conversation so far is that when there's a problem with the relationship, it's normally with the individual, is rather than kind of directing the blame. And I kind of relate to this. I've dated kind of a narcissist before, and it's like everything was just a manifestation of um her insecurities and problems and stuff like that. And when there's some teenage girls our age out there that are just like all men are bad, when it's really like I just think they've got bad taste, and that they're just kind of repeating this over and over again, and they haven't kind of escaped it. So then I'm guessing the answer would be to work on yourself. Um and uh I kind of want to ask, is that done by um is it kind of a stage where you need to be ready enough to get back into dating, or it's sort of getting rid of all the insufficiencies you have in yourself? Like, you sort of mentioned like you spent some time working on yourself. I think, yeah, if you want to go into sort of what that looks like.
Yeah, I hope I got all that. You're cutting off a little bit, but the idea is we all have patterns, and some of those patterns don't serve us. And so if we find ourselves in the same situation over and over again, then we need to discover why we keep going there. Um, and because at the end of the day, someone could try to take us to a place, but it's our decision, it's our choice to say, well, no, I'm not going there. I'm actually going this way. And um, so I think it's important that, so the point of working on ourselves, I think, is that we can then make healthier selections and decisions. Um, so yeah, I think the selection process for many people is not as aligned to what they actually need in their life. So, and it kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation about the shallowness of the dating world right now. Like we kind of look for, we have this expectation of, the typical, like, let's say for a woman, um, you know, is like oh, we want someone who's tall, we want someone who makes good money, we want someone who maybe has a house or drives a nice car, whatever it is, right? Because we think that that means we're going to have security. That means there's going to be stability. That means we're going to be taken care of in a relationship, and we could, lean more into our feminine side. We don't have to be, necessarily caretakers of a man, like of a man child, right? We can kind of be more safe and comfortable in a relationship with someone who kind of has it figured out or has a good head on their shoulder based on these external things. But realistically, we don't actually know the character of that individual until we are in relationship with them. And so by, seeking out a person or a man who um, is a six-figure earner, who's tall, who's blah, 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 all this stuff. And then we find that, he has very narcissistic tendencies, or that he's not respectful, or that he's insensitive to our needs, or whatever it is. Like, um, there's a gap there. And so we need to learn to look for the actual qualities that makes a good partner, not just what we think we should look for. Um, and so, yeah, I'm curious as to like, I'm actually curious about you two, Joel and Jacob. Like, what's your experience been like in the dating field? Are you both single right now? Are you dating? Do you notice any patterns in the people that you've dated in the past? Like, what's it been like for you?
Shall I start, Joel? Okay. um, I'm with uh, I'm not dating, but I'm seeing someone for a month now. And she's not going to see this, so it won't matter. Um, that it kind of this is why I kind of asked like the housing question because um she's Chinese, and immediately, as kind of how uh people are maybe xenophobic in the UK, like that cuts down my like competition to like 10%, because there's language barriers and there's like difficult things, so it's like I don't care about that, whereas I know a lot of people do. So that I think that like it's an alright move for me. In the past, I've dated. My first relationship was she was a narcissist, and then
How do
since
you know
then,
human, bro? Like,
wait, say that again.
how do you know that though? You're just assuming. Like, I don't know, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Okay, um, she
She had narcissistic tendencies.
There you go.
well, it was just like very, very controlling, always very about her, very, yeah, like a little bit selfish. Everything kind of had to be her way, type thing. And then yeah, since then there's been a couple like short periods. But I haven't. I've just found they're not aligned to me enough, and I don't even think like at the moment I'm ready to be in a very long relationship because I'm a complicated person, and therefore I think it's maybe a rare individual. Yeah, your turn, Joe.
Well, now I think Mariam should psychoanalyze you first, and then I'll go. If that's the question. If we're in therapy now, that's great. I'm interested.
This is not therapy. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, so I didn't get all of
Apologies.
it. But your first, that's all right. Your first girlfriend had narcissistic tendencies. She was quite selfish. and controlling, and a lot of her behavior kind of was about her. Um, and what attracted you to her initially?
Lust. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm.
I was
How
like
long did that relationship last?
uh 10 months.
10 months, okay.
Yeah.
And how did you feel? How did you feel after it was over?
I felt quite defeated. I basically uh after that I did a lot of work on myself. Because it was like always I wasn't feeling good about who I was. So I needed to sort of build myself back up again because I was like it was like it's kind of a weird thing. I wasn't even like the dominant one in a relationship. She was the more dominant one, and that's a weird thing for a man to be in anyway. So I really had to like because she was controlling, so I had no power, and so yeah, I really need. I spent like a year building myself up in lockdown. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, it can be quite draining to be in a relationship that's very controlling because it's fear-based. There isn't much room for love and connection when you have to walk on eggshells. You don't know what's going to set that person off, and um, yeah,
I also think like
and
maybe they like you need one bad relationship to have the good ones. Like because I'm fucked up again. Like I've only that was bad for like half the time I was with her, and the rest of them. There's if it got to that stage, like I have the self worth to not deal with it.
mm, yeah, I think at some point the idea is that we don't want to date until we get to that point. We want to choose someone where, if long-term relationship is what you're looking for, we want to choose someone who we can actually um, grow with. And so they don't have to be perfect by any means. We don't have to be perfect by any means, but we want to ensure that our values align, um, the non-negotiables align. It doesn't mean that every value has to be the same. Absolutely not. But yeah, but what are my non-negotiables for being in a relationship? What do I require from someone in order for me to build a long-term healthy relationship with? And so we need to, yeah, reflect on that and write it down and see, like, within the when we're in the early dating or seeing someone, or pursuing someone, we need to kind of look to see if they have that and ask as many questions as we can to kind of learn about their mindset, learn about what they need and want in a relationship, and asking even like the hard questions of like, what made your last relationship end, right? People don't like that question so much. Um, but it's so important because if they're just blaming the other person and they're not taking any accountability for their part, then that's kind of a, I don't want to be like, that's a red flag, that's a green flag, but that's something to be mindful of.
Yeah,
Um,
like your point
because
about
yeah,
I like your point about non-negotiables because I kind of you want to be in harmony. Um, and to me, harmony is agreement. And so if you have those fundamental blocks, then it should be that's a lot of the problem sorted.
hmm, yeah.
Is it my
One
turn?
of my non-negotiables is growth mindset, right? Like I want to ensure that my partner is um, is pursuing growth and development, and um, And for him personally, because I know then he's going to be more satisfied in his life, right? And in his career and all those things. And that our relationship is also growth oriented. It doesn't mean that we're constantly in the season of growth. Sometimes we need a season of rest, but that we are moving forward together, and that we fight well with one another, which is really bizarre because we've been together for about 4 years, almost 4 years, and we've yet to have a bad fight. We're both very calm, very respectful in our
Well, you're a
communication.
relationship coach.
Um, but I mean, yeah, but I mean, I have my own patterns. Like, I actually, if we're talking about like attachment, you're familiar with the attachment theory or different attachment styles, yeah?
I am, yeah. I don't know too much,
Um,
but
I'm vaguely. Just you can do like a summary.
Well, yeah, so it's kind of the attachment theory is based on our early childhood experiences with our parents, like how likely it was for our needs to be met. And and so when we cry as a baby, where we tended to, and how that frequency was. So was it quite consistent? Was it occasional? Or was it very minimal? And so we can take on four different attachment styles. So one of them being secure, that we trust, and my dog has this when it comes to food. It's really funny. His brother, my dog, there's two of them. The oldest one is my brother's dog, and when it comes to food, he will chew up your hand. Like he's a savager. Like he thinks, there's not going to be enough, or he thinks, yeah, like it's going to be his last meal or something. Whereas my dog, when you try to feed him, he's so gentle. He just takes it so gently from your hand, and he expects to receive food. Um, and so, yeah, with the secure attached, we don't have anxious tendencies or avoidant tendencies. We're kind of like we're quite neutral. We feel as adults, we feel secure and safe and confident in ourselves. Whereas the anxious child um, is very fearful of being abandoned, very fearful of being left. Um, and then you have the avoidant who's actually afraid of intimacy because intimacy hurts. And so basically, all other three are fearful based, and the fourth one is being secure, right? So the third fearful one is anxious avoidant, which is what I am. So I'm a blend of the two. I'm afraid of intimacy, but I also need intimacy. And so yeah, I noticed when those tendencies come up, and I've kind of learned to soothe myself, and I've learned to not allow my emotions to negate how I behave towards my partner. I've learned how to communicate my needs and my feelings. And so, yeah, I don't do this perfectly all the time. But yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a very interesting theory, and it is quite like helpful for many people to look at their tendencies in a relationship. And what happens is the interesting dynamic is that avoidance and anxious attached people always tend to find each other. And they basically they're the opposite, but somehow you will find um, a lot of anxiously attached individuals with avoidantly attached individuals. And it's because what happens is from a young age, these dynamics are kind of ingrained into our nervous system, right? So a lot of the time we're reacting based on what we've been conditioned to feel and to respond, how we've been kind of conditioned to be in relationships. And so, yeah, those people tend to find themselves in really unhappy relationship because one of them is trying to run away while the other one is like, no, you can't run away, you can't leave me. Um, and so, yeah, but anyhow,
Joel, Joel,
I want to
what's your
also keep
attachment?
time for Joel.
Okay, well, you know what? So, okay, I'll just tell my story then, and then see what you interpret from it because I am interested. So, in like my mid-teens, I had like a 2 year relationship, um, which for like your mid-teens is like a century. Do you know what I mean? But then actually, it got to the point where, as I was going through that similar process that I alluded to earlier, when lockdown happened, and I realized that I didn't really want to be associated with the friends that I was around most of the time. I also realized that the relationship I was in, I was only in it really to just be in a relationship. And this is me just being very honest and authentic of like when you're in school and college and stuff, it's like a great status symbol to be in a relationship, isn't it? And it's like, me and this girl, we had
Mm-hmm.
a great time and there was no issues or anything. But I was just like, I'm too weird for you in a way. Like that's how it felt. I was like, we got on really well, things are fine, but as I was, I call it like this was like the stage of my life where I was trying to figure out what I really wanted, and like she didn't really fit into that picture. So that just fizzled out like very nicely though, and very naturally. And then I found what's interesting is I feel like in the last 4 years, I've grown up at like a really quick rate, and I feel like I struggle to really relate to like my age group a lot of the time, just because of the way I am and the things I've experienced and stuff. So I struggle to find. I feel like my intentions towards like dating is very different to people around my age. So I'm looking for basically like the long term partner that's gonna want to be with me for the long haul, right? Whereas I feel like the experiences I've had is a lot of the girls our age just want like a guy who's going to give them their full attention and they're going to be the prize in their life. Where really I'm trying to build something and I want someone to go with me on that path. And what I found along that is if someone comes along who I see like ticks some boxes, right, for what I'm looking for, and seem to signal to me that they feel a similar way, I get like attached quite quickly to the point where I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this could be it, Joel. This could be it. Like, and then I've had like 2 or 3 experiences in the past 2 years where that then maybe I've been sold a dream and through sort of I don't know non-verbal signals or through even things that people have said to me, been told like that could be the case, and then it hasn't really become something because maybe they don't want to commit or there's something not quite right from their perspective, and I've just been like, great, okay, I thought I was on the line to that person, and it's not happened. And then I'm still sort of on that journey now and trying to figure out like, okay, Joel, how do you remain authentic? Because you know what you want and you know where you're going, you know what your life to look like, but that's very rare. So how do you stay authentic to that while trying to navigate sort of the age that I am and the position I'm in life? So yeah, I'm interested to see what you think.
Mm-hmm. What was the idea or the dream that you got sold in those relationships?
Okay, so it's kind of like the idea is like I've been. It's sort of like your. There was a girl I knew for a long time. We were like really good friends through school and that. We sort of started to have a thing when we were kids. Like we liked each other. Kids, I mean like 13, 14. And then
Mm-hmm.
one of her relationships ended. And she basically told me, like, in more words than that, that, like, once I'm healed from this guy, then we can be together type thing. And I was like, all right, sound. Like, I'm not going to be sleeping around or being a numpty because that's not the way that I exist. And then that dream that was kind of big in my brain never then came to fruition. So that was like the main one. And I've learned a lot from that, which is just like, don't trust like when you fall into like you get these strong beliefs based on feelings and then you can hold on to them like they're so true and in reality then if that doesn't happen that can crush you, and I've learned a lot about sort of my own
Mm-hmm.
expectations through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she wanted space and time to heal from her relationship, in
Mm.
order to be with you, to give you like a better version of herself, but she didn't follow through with that. She just kind
Yeah,
of,
it was interesting. I mean,
yeah,
like, there's obviously a lot more like complicated stuff going on in the background, but it was kind of like
yeah,
I was like a good emotional support for her when she was going through that difficulty. And then yeah,
yeah,
there was intentions of like in X amount of time when I'm healed, then we'll live happily ever after, and there was
mm,
didn't happen.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry that
That's all right.
happened.
You
Because
did not expect me talking about this on
yeah,
a
you,
podcast on a Tuesday. Quite funny.
no, it's just well, because you had a friendship prior to, right? So that loss is not just romantic, but it's also a friendship, and it's also a lot of energy and heart and intention you put into supporting this individual. And yeah, and to find out at the end of the day that her words were empty, like there wasn't actually a follow through for whatever reason. um, yeah, that sucks. Um, but you mentioned that there's like two or three instances where you're kind of sold an idea.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's like none were as strong as that one, but it's like been a similar theme where, like, I don't know,
mm,
I feel like I create it bigger in my mind because I'm a very like in my head kind of person, and it's like
mm,
we get on really well, but it's then like I don't think they wanted to commit like I wanted to. Because
mm.
we're at different stages in life, and maybe psychologically we're at different like maturation stages that where I wanted like a commitment and they didn't, and that's fine, but that's just the way it worked out.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right, that's the fantasy trick that so many of us fall into, like meeting someone, and we get to know them a little bit, like some aspect about them, and then our mind just kind of starts creating this like whole world of like us existing together, and whatnot. And so the interesting thing about how the mind works is like it creates emotions in our body, and it creates chemical connections in our body as if it's real. So, whatever we kind of imagine, whatever that fantasy is, we experience it as if it is real. And so, when the rug is kind of pulled up from underneath us, then it's quite confusing for our brain, and quite confusing for our body, just like how, yeah, our brain and body are connected. Um, and that's why, like, heartbreak is so painful. Because actually, I don't know if you are familiar with Helen Fisher, Dr. Helen Fisher. Have you heard of her before? So she's a scientist and researcher, and she worked with Match.com. She was like their main. Match.com is like a dating website, and so she did a lot of like research on how we fall in love and what happens in our body, like in our brain, chemically, so physiologically, everything. Um, and she found that the same chemicals associated with falling in love, or this, yeah, falling in love has the same chemical response as we do if we were on a cocaine high. So the like, oh, so when we're kind of like feeling those whatever butterflies, I have another kind of thought about butterflies though, but I don't think butterflies are really a good sign, like intuitively, but that's another thought. But yeah, like when we're falling in love, there's typically three main chemicals that's going on in our brain and in our body. It's dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. And so basically, um, yeah, and they give us like this high as if we are on cocaine. And so too much of it can actually lead to addiction. And what happens is because we are biologically wired for connection and we're biologically wired for relationship, for intimacy, um, it's so natural for these chemicals to take effect, even when, the pieces are not of the puzzle are not all there. We can, we fall in lust, and then we fall into attraction, and then we fall into attachment. And so when we are faced with a breakup, um, this like, while this like rush of when we're falling in love, while this rush of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and all that settles down and like weans off over time, that attachment that it activates remains and continues to grow. And so when a breakup takes place, your brain doesn't register that quickly, the breakup that quickly. So it anticipates seeing your ex, it anticipates you spending time with them, talking to them, everything that you did before. And this is why we yearn for those people. It's more than just missing someone, is actually like neurological reaction taking place and influencing us beyond our awareness. And so a big portion of how we respond when we separate from people is not so much of just an emotional attachment or like a likeness that we had to that person, but a lot of it is actually beyond, like underneath the surface. A lot of it is caused by chemical reaction, which is why it's important that we go no contact for, at least a minimum of a month to allow those chemicals to start to settle down. Um, and so, yeah, like those chemicals, whereas before they felt good and they helped us sleep well and all this stuff, now they're doing the opposite.
Mm.
Sorry, Jacob, you had something or? Yeah, right now I'm on Instagram mostly. I am on Twitter occasionally at Life with Mayor. Um, and in my Instagram bio, you can find all the different links. So I actually created like a boundaries workshop, which is a really like good deep dive. It's a part 2 series of helping people with boundaries, because boundaries and communication, because that's one of the biggest thing that people come to me with. And I've also actually created a course on heartbreak, and I share a lot of, in module 2, I go over all the science stuff of attachment and all that. So, yeah, people need support. It could be a great place to start. Um, but I've really enjoyed my time with both of you, and I wish to learn more about both of you. And um, it's been, yeah, a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope to connect again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was great to meet you too.